Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it's time for the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, first question. What to do if you can't do 3x10 with 70% only something like 10-9-9 or something like that, even with 5-minute breaks? One person put, then you need more GPP. I'm not saying that's wrong. It probably is true. You probably need a little more conditioning. You're not in shape. That's a possibility, particularly with those long breaks. Right, that's one thing to think about. The other thing to think about would be how late are you doing it in a workout? Sometimes, particularly, let's come back over to conditioning and work capacity. If you are not in good shape, if you're doing it as a second exercise, like let's say you're doing two different movements. Let's for example, we'll call it flat bench and incline bench, right? So let's say that your incline bench you're doing second after having done 3 sets of flat bench with pretty close to limit sets. Well, you're already fatigued from that, so you might find that getting 10 reps on all the sets might become very, very difficult because you don't have the work capacity for it. Now, GPP and stuff will help with that. Building work capacity while training will help with that, but you have a work capacity issue. So in that case, you might be better off for the second movement doing just a bunch of rep work, some higher rep work to failure. It may help you get into better shape there for that. That's one possibility to think about. So let's come back over to what if it's the first movement. So let's say you start with it's like it's max effort day. So you start with a max and you get a max on your bench press or some variation of it. But let's say you do just bench and you're going to base your new workout off that bench. So you hit a max and then you rest 5 minutes and then start doing the rep work. And you hit something like this. Well, realistically, 70% for an all-out AMREP should be about 11 or 12 reps. Right? If you're fresh, it should be about 11 to 12 reps. It should be that for an all-out, everything you have max. So if you're getting 9 and 9 after only doing 10, there's something wrong possibly with your max. Now, again, this is also assuming you're not too fatigued from dieting too hard or anything. Maybe your max was an all-out grinder. Maybe you cheated. Maybe you bounced the bar off your chest. Right? Maybe you bounced the bar off your chest. And now you're trying to do pause work. Or you did something to really cheat the weight up. Let's say maybe you're counting it as a max, but you had to grind as hard as you could for 5 seconds and then the spotter helped you at the last couple inches. Right? It could be something to where it was either an all-out grinding max to where the form started to break down, or you had to cheat the weight up, or you short-stroked a rep, in which case the max isn't accurate. So that's also something that could be causing that. So you need to assess your maxes carefully and say, was this max the same quality of rep that I'm going to be doing on my rep work? And I'll have another question, and it'll be in the next few weeks out of the same block I pulled out of the opposite extreme, to where the person's rep work is easier than their max, and so it's calculating it incorrectly. But in any event, as long as you know that your max was correct, right, and you're doing similar type of reps and rep quality on the rep work, it's probably a conditioning and work capacity issue. All right, next question. RDLs are good mornings first if doing them in the same session. I actually have clients who do this. I actually do have clients who we do RDLs and good mornings both. And that might shock some people because a lot of people will hear me say, well, I think the good morning is generally a more useful exercise. Doesn't mean the RDL isn't a good exercise, and there can be a benefit to doing both if it addresses specific weaknesses. So I don't dislike the RDL. It's just that when people ask me if you had to pick one or the other, well, the good morning is more useful. All of my lifters do good mornings, all of them, no exceptions. Only some of them do RDLs. But stop and think about it. Generally, we want to do, for the same muscle groups, we generally want to do the bigger, harder movements first and then go bigger to lighter. There can be exceptions to that, of course, but that's usually a good rule to follow. So I will generally have my lifters do RDLs before good mornings because they're probably going to use more weight. And there seems to be a lot of controversy about that, by the way. I'm going to go on a sidetrack for a moment here. A lot of people out there, people shouldn't be able to deadlift more than they RDL or even equal to their deadlift, and it's like, really? I've seen plenty of lifters who can RDL more than they deadlift, particularly when it comes to rep work. So I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think that's necessarily true, but your RDL should either way be pretty close to what your conventional deadlift is. And accordingly, it's probably going to be more than your good morning. Probably going to be more than your good morning. So therefore, you are most likely going to be using heavier weights, and you should be, because if you think of the moment arms involved, your back has a shorter moment arm on a Romanian deadlift versus a good morning. And that's also why when we use different bars on the good morning, we can use more or less weight, because we're changing the length of the moment arm involved with the spine. When RDL is using the shoulder joint, right? So that's a little further down as far as your center of gravity goes along your spine than what a good morning is. So it's going to be a heavier weight. And because, again, we're having to hold the weight, there's going to be some shoulder extension and everything involved. Again, it's a little bit bigger of a movement. So I would tend to program it first. Now, you could do it second. You certainly could if you wanted to. I just think as a general rule, you're going to get more out of it if you do it first. Because we're used to doing good mornings all the time later into a workout, right? That's normal. It's normal. Once you're used to that, if you throw an RDL in, it's not really a big deal because you're just filling that slot with something else. Some extra box squats you might normally do in that slot, some isolateral leg work, whatever. Because we tend to do good mornings a little further in most of the time. So again, they're used to being done as a secondary exercise, and they don't seem to be bothered by fatigue as much anyways. In other words, you can do other lifts before the good morning and still hit your percentages prescribed, just like the other guy asked about that 70% for tens. You almost never have problems doing 70% for tens, even if the good morning is your third exercise of the day. It's rarely a problem. It doesn't seem to suffer from work capacity issues the same way, based off percentages of maxes. All right, next question. Have you ever thought about any other training besides powerlifting, like strongman or anything else? You're a really strong dude. Well, the training is not the difference. Meaning, I know some really good strongmen who do conjugate. So I assume you mean would I compete in anything else? Well, it's enough effort and work for me to even get ready to compete in powerlifting. And making that work into my life to even start competing again is already enough hassle. I really don't want to do other sports on top of it. If I did, they would be shooting sports, and I've done some competitive shooting in the last few years. It just doesn't go on the internet. People don't need to worry about it or know about it. But I like shooting sports. But if we're gonna talk strength specifically, I would stick with powerlifting for that. And it's not that I don't really like strongman. It's that powerlifting is a test of pure brute strength, nothing else. And anyone who argues against that does not understand what strength means. They don't understand what the sport of powerlifting actually is. They're clueless about biomechanics. Powerlifting is a test of brute strength. So in gaming stats, it's basically a strength check, right? Test your strength. Strongman tests your strength and, say, your constitution or vitality, depending on what game. If you want to put it in gamer terms, right? It tests your conditioning and your work capacity along with your strength. It tests a couple of different athletic attributes, right? What is Olympic lifting? It's a test of strength and dexterity or agility because of the skill and the movement involved. So powerlifting is at this time the only pure test of strength. It's the only pure test of strength. These other strength sports actually test other attributes, other athletic attributes besides purely strength. And I like strength. I'm about strength. It's what I do. So I might as well stick with something that tests your strength. And it doesn't mean I can't train for some of the other things. I do plenty of cardio and conditioning work because it's useful for my training. It's useful for my health, and I want to be athletic. But overall, as far as the main training and goals, it's going to be generally powerlifting geared because that's what I like. That's what I enjoy. But I have respect for people who do those other endeavors too. Like strongman looks like probably the funnest of those sports. But I have to consider the balance aspect. I do have a vestibular disorder. Then we have to think about the fact that I already had that shoulder impingement that I had to recover from, and my overhead press strength isn't that great again yet. You need to be stupidly strong at overhead pressing to do strongman. So there are limiting factors there for me personally. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.